to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Jealousy episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. Jealousy can be detrimental in a relationship if it's not managed well. In this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, I'm going to talk about what to do if you are the jealous one in a relationship and what to do if your partner or spouse is the jealous one. Or maybe you both get jealous. I'll talk about the impact jealousy can have on a relationship. And to be clear, I'm not talking about the fleeting moments of jealousy that we can all have from time to time. That's normal. I'm talking about the kind of jealousy that causes big problems in a relationship. Like chronic jealousy or whatever. I'll give you an example using Wynn and Jenny, not their real names. They were married for almost 9 years. They met at work, and Wynn was actually married to his previous wife at the time. Wynn and Jenny had an instant connection. Wynn trusted Jenny and would often talk to her about the problems he was having in his marriage. And after about a year, they ended up having an affair. Eventually, Wynn filed for divorce, and he and Jenny got married a little over a year later. Now, the first few years were great, but then gradually, over time, Jenny started showing signs of jealousy. She would call Wynn a few times a day, asking where he was and what he was doing. She started monitoring his phone, his emails, and checking out his social media. Wynn confronted Jenny, and they talked openly about it. She said she suspected that he was having an affair. And Wynn wasn't having an affair, and he tried to assure Jenny that he wasn't. He got the fact that he and Jenny had had an affair while he was married, and how Jenny might have her suspicions that he might do it to her as well. Well, since meeting Jenny, Wynn had gone to therapy. He had turned over a new leaf and was committed to never cheating again. He had learned his lesson and was definitely committed to Jenny. And he even said that if he found himself attracted to someone and even considered having an affair, that he would talk about it with her. Wynn also worked on building trust with Jenny. He became very transparent, an open book. Jenny had all of Wynn's usernames, passwords, and PIN numbers. Wynn was open to answering Jenny's questions and letting her know his whereabouts. But it didn't seem to help, and it got so bad that one Saturday morning, Wynn was sleeping in when Jenny came busting in the bedroom screaming, "Who the fuck is Angie?" Well, Wynn was all disoriented and whatnot and had no idea what she was talking about. Then Jenny showed him a piece of paper that she found in Wynn's car with the name Angie and a phone number on it. Wynn explained to her that it was the number to a new cafe near his job where he ordered lunch. And he called the number and proved to Jenny that it was the cafe. Well, after that, Wynn advocated for them to go to marriage counseling. And Jenny reluctantly went, but didn't really participate. When the therapist would ask her a question, she would respond with short 1 or 2 word answers. And after a couple of sessions, Jenny stopped showing up for therapy. They were arguing a lot, and Wynn found himself pulling more and more away from Jenny. Well, eventually, Wynn found out from Jenny's sister that Jenny had been having affairs all the while she was accusing him of having an affair. And Wynn couldn't believe it. He had no idea, and it was a total mind F for him. It was like she was projecting her own guilt onto Wynn while he was innocent the whole time. Well, he ended up filing for divorce, and the marriage ended. In this situation, Wynn pretty much did all he could to work with Jenny's jealousy and make the marriage work. He worked on himself by going to therapy. He empathized with Jenny about why she would be concerned, understanding that. He made an effort to build trust by being transparent. And they talked openly about it and tried marriage counseling. At least Wynn was up for it. Well, unfortunately, in this case, Jenny wasn't on board and the relationship dissolved. And it was pretty obvious that Jenny was not committed to the relationship. And you can see by this example that jealousy can be a messy and complicated thing in relationship. So yeah, jealousy is not a good thing in relationship. And again, having jealous feelings in your relationship is normal at times. But when it comes excessive, irrational, and causes conflict in the relationship, well, that's a pretty good sign that it's time to get some help. And a lot of times jealousy comes from having low self-esteem or low self-worth. Constantly comparing themselves to others and looking for validation. Jealousy can also cause the person to distrust others, especially if they've been betrayed in the past. And something that I've seen with mostly men who are jealous is to be controlling and to isolate their partner from anyone he sees as a threat. Controlling who they can be friends with or hang out with socially. Some other ways jealousy shows up in relationship is through being constantly suspicious, always looking for any clue that could mean that they're being unfaithful. Also being extra possessive and monitoring their partner's every move. Stalking would be an extreme version of this. And going back to the example of Wynn and Jenny, you can imagine how challenging it must have been for Wynn having his wife be so jealous for no reason and putting forth all that effort, all the work he did trying to save the relationship only to have it end. Another example of jealousy is the story of JB and Diana. Not their real names, of course. In this case, JB was the jealous one. He had been in a long-term relationship prior to meeting Diana. He had been engaged to be married, and the date was set, and a week before the wedding, Diana called off the wedding. Turned out she was still in love with her ex-boyfriend who had recently resurfaced. Well, needless to say, this crushed JB. He was so hurt, and it took him a long time to even think about being in a committed relationship. Well, after some time had passed, and JB, thinking he was over what happened in his previous relationship, ended up meeting Diana, who was very attractive and outgoing. JB was more introverted, yet they really hit it off, and they ended up in a serious relationship. As time went on and they were feeling more and more comfortable and committed to each other, the topic of marriage came up. And to say the least, JB was reluctant to take it that far, considering his history. And Diana was aware of his history and agreed to give JB some time to think about it. And that's when things got a little whack. You see, Diana was a sales executive and was very social and had a wide social network. They would often attend social events together. And with Diana being more gregarious and outgoing, and JB being more introverted and laid back, JB often felt left out. And with Diana being so attractive, men would often approach her. In the beginning of their relationship, JB was cool with it and was actually proud that at the end of the day, she was with him. But it got old after a while, and JB started getting jealous. So fast forward to after the talk about marriage, one night they were at this fancy gala when JB had a little bit too much to drink, and he got belligerent with some guy that Diana knew from a previous job. JB ended up taking a swing at the guy, and after a brief scuffle, he was escorted out of the event, and Diana was humiliated. Well, the next morning, JB was really embarrassed and full of remorse. He couldn't believe what he did, and he apologized profusely to Diana, saying that he's never done anything like that and that it would never happen again. Well, Diana wasn't quick to forgive JB. In fact, she gave him an ultimatum. She told him that in order for her to stay in the relationship, he would have to get some help around his jealousy. He really loved Diana and was willing to do anything to keep her. And he was used to going to therapy and everything, so he was open to the idea. And that's when a friend referred him to me, and we got to work. We worked on having compassion for himself, for basically being left at the altar in that previous relationship. Well, having his fiancée pulling out a week before the wedding, recognizing the trauma of it all, and how painful it was for him. And he never really dealt with it. We also addressed how his experience could have influenced his acting out with jealousy. And he got it. He said that he had never really been a jealous person. I think this was JB's saving grace, because a lot of people with deep jealousy issues can have a really hard time admitting it. So we ended up working on building up his confidence and being more secure with himself in relationship, whether he was with Diana or not. We worked on having him develop a healthy mindset, focusing on the positive aspects of Diana and the relationship, and with that, building trust. Well, JB took all this to heart and worked really hard on his growth. And it paid off too, because in talking with Diana, she assured him that he was the one for her. And they not only got engaged, they tied the knot, and Diana is expecting their first child. Now, this was a case where in the long run, it all worked out. Yet it doesn't always work out. The impact of jealousy in a relationship really depends on how intense it is, how often it shows up, and the dynamics of the relationship. Here are some common ways jealousy can negatively impact relationships. And a lot of this is obvious, and some maybe not so obvious. The first is overall dissatisfaction in the relationship, a breakdown in trust, and a breakdown in communications as well. Both parties can suffer emotionally. Their emotional well-being can suffer as a result of jealousy. Jealousy can create instability in the relationship, cause a lack of intimacy and feeling close to one another. And suspicion about the other's behavior may lead to infidelity. Not necessarily the reason for it, but it could push you in that direction. I think the bottom line here is being able to recognize where jealousy shows up and be willing to talk about it. Address it. Get help, whether you're the jealous one or your partner is the jealous one. Take action to work on it, and it can work out. And go for the long term of your relationship. I found a quote about jealousy in relationship. It's from an American author named Robert Heinlein. He says, quote, "Jealousy is a disease. Love is a healthy condition. The immature mind often mistakes one for the other, or assumes that the greater the love, the greater the jealousy. In fact, they are almost incompatible. One emotion hardly leaves room for the other." And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Jealousy episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. Thank you so much for listening. I do appreciate it. So have you gotten to the point where you feel bored in your relationship? Tired of the routine, feeling like you're in a rut? Need to spice things up? Well, please join me for the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Breaking the Boredom episode. And remember, if you have any questions or issues about your relationship you need help with, if you have any comments or feedback about the podcast, please share them with me. I'd love to hear from you. You can find my email address in the show notes or email me at bill at pathwaystolivingwell.com. That's Bill at pathwaystolivingwell.com. And if you know someone who you think might benefit from listening to this podcast, please share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.